And then we get this curious statement that in Luke 3 and verse 7, it says that as the people came for baptism, John turns around and calls them, "You brood of snakes." In Matthew 3 and verse 7, what we see is that it's actually the Pharisees and the Sadducees, these religious people who are coming along and watching what John's doing. They're the ones that John calls a brood of snakes. But they were also a social group. They sought to influence how people lived. In other words, they wanted to put their theology into influencing day-to-day people's activities. They were, in effect, the blue-collar believers. They were a group of people who were what we might call today the sort of lay leaders in the church. They believed that worship was not meant to happen just in the temple. And so they had a legalistic interpretation of the written law that was based on the oral traditions. So the traditions that had been passed down of how to interpret the written law were what they based their theology on, what they based their beliefs on. And what they sought to do was to get people to live in accordance with these traditions, this legalistic interpretation of the law that was the oral beliefs alongside the written beliefs. And they sought to put that jacket onto people to say, if you want to be accepted by God, you've got to follow all of these traditions and all of these laws. And this is why they came into conflict with both John and Jesus, because John and Jesus were very much interpreting God's word in a different way. Rather than seeking to pile on lots of interpretations and lots of legalities of what it meant to know God, John and Jesus came with a sense that there is a new way to live in relationship with God that is about freedom that comes through getting a heart that's right with God, rather than following the rules. And in fact, not only did John call them a brood of snakes, Jesus in Matthew 23 and verse 33, he also called them a brood of vipers, a brood of snakes. So Jesus and John had the same interpretation of the Pharisees, that they were trying to get people to believe and follow God based on traditions. How much of what we believe today as Christians is based on our traditions? How much of what we expect of discipleship or following God is based on our interpretations of the how, the what, the where, the when? You know, if you want to be a follower of Jesus, then you have to do these things. You have to follow these, these ways. That might be the way that we sing, the style of our worship, the way we dress on a Sunday, what we're allowed to do or not allowed to do on a Sunday. The different things that people hold, often the traditions that have come in are used to create this sense of the tribe. And often the danger is that we invite people not into a relationship with Jesus, but a relationship with the tribe. And in that sense, the danger is that we turn our Christian theology into something similar to what the Pharisees were doing, which is saying if you want to follow God and you want to know God, then you've got to obey these rules, you've got to meet these standards, you've got to meet these traditions. And when John and Jesus came and challenged the Pharisees' interpretations and their traditions, when their traditions were being stripped away, they began to feel unsafe and challenged by God. And I wonder, how do you respond when your traditions are taken away? We've been through a season of lockdown where the way we do church has been stripped away and we've had to find different ways to do it. And for some people, that's challenged their foundational beliefs in who God is and what it means to have a relationship with him. And for many of us, as we start to return out of lockdown into meeting, we want to say we don't want to go back to the old traditions, because actually The old traditions were more about our tradition than it was a relationship with God. But I wonder today, how do you feel when you look at your faith? Is your faith based on traditions or based on relationship? And a good test of that is, how do you feel when your traditions are stripped away?